Hello, Simon. I am delighted to see you again.
And I'm delighted to be back. Hello, Bruce.
Well, Simon, we are going to talk about your second published novel, Lady Mabel's Gold. It is somewhat marketed as the sequel to The Beast of Bethulia Park, but it stands alone, and there's a lot of characters that carry over, but at the same time, it's quite a different book. Starts with a medieval uh, story which is like Bethulia Park, but it's a different medieval story
To
there.
give you a reading from the medieval story, I'd be happy to read the first two pages.
Yeah, please.
Should we do that? And then I can
Yeah,
tell you a little bit about your viewers can get a sense of what the book's like, and then we can
yeah.
talk a little bit about the. So this is from the prologue, England's richest man. So this is where the story starts, and it's Sunday, 9th of August, 1299. Perhaps we will have a visit from our lord today, muttered Lady Mabel through tight lips. She took a long, sharp knife and sliced into a roasted chicken gilded with egg yolk. She carved the breast with assiduous care and used a fork to place the choicest cuts of steaming white flesh on a wooden platter, nudging and kicking away several cats which brushed against her calves to pester for scraps. Sir Henry Tudor looked on, hungry, bored, and impatient. From the Lord's table is a ritual he'd seen a dozen times, more than his liking. This infuriating custom of leaving the best plate of food for the first beggar who knocked at the doors of Hay Hall, the timber frame manor house he shared with his wife for 4 months. Lady Mabel opened a pot on the table and used a pair of wooden spoons to lift out boiled and buttered cabbage, among the first of that summer's harvest, and from another dish added a few scoops of fermenty, a white porridge made from wheat. She put the platter on a vacant seat at the opposite end of the table from her bristling husband. His eyes narrowed. Soon this insult must end. Our Lord isn't coming today, he sneered. Our Lord has no need of my chickens. He has plenty of his own. And anyway, our Lord prefers fish. Our Lord has better things to do than to waste his time by tricking me in the guise of a beggar. He raised his voice. Our Lord doesn't come here anymore, Mabel. Why are you wasting your time with this pious nonsense? I'm sick to death of it. Mabel slopped the fermenty onto her husband's plate, her cheeks florid with bottled rage. She crossed over to him and released the plate with unconcealed contempt an inch from his nose, from the oak surface of the table. It rattled beneath his nose. Tudor's eyes bulged. He thumped the table with a clenched fist and jumped up from the canopy bench. Don't you dare raise a hand against me, Henry Tudor, shouted Mabel as she backed away. You may be the master of this house, but you ought to show more gratitude and kindness to the one from whom your fortune comes. So that's Lady Mabel Bradshaw. Typical Sunday afternoon in the Bradshaw house. So,
That's right.
they're not
I
getting
tell
on
you what,
very
I was
well.
thinking, Simon, I was thinking if the BBC adapted this novel, they would give Sir Henry Tudor a very rural Welsh accent, just
Yeah,
to be
well, I think he would have
diverse.
had one. Yeah, and she would have had a very provincial accent as well, no doubt. So it's based on a true story. So Lady Mabel Bradshaw is a very well-known figure in my town, which is Wigan. Not many people know where it is. It's a town between Liverpool and Manchester and South Lancashire. Historically
Obviously,
linked to
rugby league
yeah,
fans know where it is.
they would, yeah. And we also won the football team also won the FA Cup in 2013 when we beat Manchester City. But I think George Orwell has probably put it on the map more than anyone else with the road to Wigan Pier, which he visited. Not a lot of people here thank him for that because he visited the town at a time when the coal fields had run dry and poverty was extreme was severe. And he came here for that particular reason because he wanted to do an equivalent to say Jack London's The People of the Abyss or that kind of thing, the Iron Heel. So he was looking for examples to write about and express his own political opinions. So he did Down and Out in Paris and London, The Road to Wigan Pier. So people kind of associated the place with poverty and dark satanic mills and everything bad for about 100 years. But the history is really really interesting, and this is I think is the most enduring of all the local legends. And every child around here knows about Lady Mabel. They're taught about it in primary school. They go to visit Hay Hall, and the reason why she's such an interesting character is she inherited the first hall from her father. Hugh Norris. So she was a wealthy single child, and she married beneath her. She was of Norman descent, and she married a Saxon knight who was coming through very, very strongly. So William Bradshaw, who came up from Staffordshire, and soon after they were married, he was called away on the Crusades. This is according to the legend, which was recorded by twice over. And after 10 years, she thought he was dead, and she remarried, and he came back from the Crusades to find her with the second husband, chased the second husband 10 miles and slew him, and then came back to her, and they resumed the marriage. And he was killed in an ambush by local rivals in 1333, and she survived him until she was killed by the Black Death in 1349. And in the local parish church in the town centre, they lie side by side. He's still in his Crusader garb, and she's her hands in prayer next to him. So in those days, because she'd given public scandal for bigamy, she had to do public penance. So this is where the local attraction continues, because she had to walk from Hay Hall for the rest of her life once a week to a cross called Mab's Cross, and bare-legged and barefoot, and make offer prayers of atonement and penance for the adultery and the bigamy that she had committed against her husband. So when I was growing up, we were playing in the plantation, these forests that surround Hay Hall. They're still there because the last Earl of Balcarras handed over the hall and its estate to the council in 1947, and they preserved it very well. And the people go. I think it's the largest forested area in Greater Manchester. So we used to go in there as kids with dogs, and we always have these legends about Lady Mabel's ghost coming out after dark and floating through the forest, and we'd all get out before nightfall. So the reason why she's in the book, well, I had a few ideas about the sequel to the Beast of Bethulia Park, and I growing up, I used to walk, like I say, I used to walk my dogs around there, and there's still quite a lot of people, especially old boys, out walking as well, and they talk to you about what the memories of what the old mining landscape was like. And they said there's a slag heap called the Watchy, which appears in the book, and at one time that would glow in the dark. There were subterranean fires in the slag, and the whole thing would glow. And then so they tell you about all these things. And then one of the things that really, really interested me was stories about the tunnels that still existed underneath the forest that were dug by the miners, and they're still there. And if you knew how to get into them, you could go into these tunnels. So I thought, wouldn't it be good to have to set a story locally, and to somehow have some of the story set in these tunnels. And then I thought, yeah, it'd be great to also have to spread the characters out rather than just a few kind of people in the 20s and 30s, 40s, which is more the Beast sort of concentrated on that age group, to spread out more widely and involve children. So for the first sort of like say 9 months or to a year, I wrote 5 or 6 chapters, and the experiments with a few things, but it never quite clicked. It never quite hung together. Then I was reading and researching all the time. And then one day I was just inspired to go down to the parish church and see Lady Mabel's tomb, because the idea kept coming to me about Lady Mabel. And when I went in, I saw the Crusader's tomb with his wife next to him. I thought, this is it. This is the it's like a eureka moment. This is what's gonna string everything together. And so the story is bookended with the legend of Lady Mabel. So you have there where she's with the second husband, the piece I read to you. They're not getting along. I've used a bit of a dramatic license to, which if you read the book, you'll understand why it's there, to explain why it's a forced marriage, and she's unhappy about it. And at the end of the chapter, William comes back, and she recognised him 10 years, and he's on the doorstep, and she thinks she's seen a ghost, and then he speaks to her, and she knows it's him. And then the epilogue, you return to the story to find out what really, really happened. And then, but the bulk of the story, it shifts to the present day, where the character from the last book, Jenny Bradshaw, is a journalist. She's on a job first job after giving birth to a son she conceived by Reinhard Klein, and it's at the tomb of the Crusaders. So it describes the Crusader tomb, and there've been an attempted burglary there, and the church wardens explained to her, look, this is what happened. We can't understand what they're looking for, and because Jenny shares the surname of Lady Mabel, which is a total accident, but I gave her the name Bradshaw in the Beast of Bethulia Park without realizing it's the same name as Lady Mabel Bradshaw. I must have done it subconsciously, but it's a great hook because then Jenny's absolutely fascinated with um, this theft or this attempted theft, whereas other reporters might just pass out, move on very quickly, and look for the next job. But it sticks in her mind, and she wants to investigate it. And as the story unfolds, I mean, it wouldn't ruin it to tell you that it's all set in the present day. It's set on the eve of lockdown, and it's about a gang of thieves who are led by an obsessive, half-mad academic, an archaeologist, who has very good grounds to believe that when William Bradshaw returned from the Crusades, he brought his wife a very special gift, a treasure which he and his brother have worked out may well be hidden in one of a number of chantries which she built after her husband had died. So they go around looking for it. And the story really is about how the mistakes that they make threaten to undo their projects and alert what they want to be to be a secret operation to the police and the journalists, and bit by bit the net closed in on them. So I won't say more than that just now.
Yeah. So thank you, Simon, for that background. As you're talking about things like treasure,
Mm.
mad academic, a criminal enterprise to find that treasure, and amateur sleuths. It does, and this sort of this long historical context. It and the religiosity, right? So there is a religious context to the treasure. There's a religious context to the modern day sleuthing because we have a return of the Catholic priest detective. He's one of the gang of amateur sleuths that carry over from the Beast of Bethulia Park. So all of that put together, it does sound very Dan Brown. And you haven't mentioned Dan Brown. Was Dan Brown's any of his novels inspirational here?
I've never read a single novel by Dan Brown. So it can't be. So,
Yeah, it can't
sorry about
be.
that. I'm just one
Yeah.
of the few people
No,
who haven't, but
no. He is very divisive.
yeah. To
In
be honest, I was
particular,
probably more inspired by The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. The way they're
yeah.
charging around the American Midwest in the aftermath of the Civil War, during the Civil War, looking for treasure buried in an unmarked grave.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I
that's
hadn't thought
probably
about that. Yeah. And the chaos, so the descent into lockdown creates a bit of Wild West sort of context for that. Yeah.
yeah.
I see what you mean. Okay, so but since we're on lockdown, it did occur to me that lockdown is a useful device. I never, in a narrative sense, it's a useful device. I never thought of it uh, in as having a potential use as you managed to use it. It sort of drives people together. So you can use it um, to compress the time. So there is this sort of urgency that lockdown's coming. Everybody knows it's coming. They're getting warned by the government it's coming, and it creates an urgency to go out and discover things before you get locked into your homes. There's mysteries.
Yeah.
There's murder going on. There's also the mystery of that. There's clearly a gang trying to uh, discover this gold, and then there's a separate mystery about, well, where they may think it's over there, but where is it really? So that lockdown, you tell me, if you consciously use lockdown these two ways, you
Yeah.
kind of create an urgency, and then you also use lockdown to force people together. So kind of strangers, like the best example is there's a detective and Jenny. They're sort of towards the end of the novel. I don't want to give too much away, but lockdown creates an opportunity for them to live together, and there's urgency about that too, and then that has romantic implications, etc. So were you consciously using lockdown in those
Yes.
devices as those devices?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I do actually plan novels as much as I can. The first two, I mean, you do make changes as you go because all of a sudden you might see, well, this is better if I do it this way, but there is a skeleton outline, and I decided to condense this story into 3 weeks. I mean, that's what it is, and it does it creates tension, it creates urgency. It's like a race. So they're racing against time, they're racing against each other. Um, I mean, and it means that you create a page turner because you have that it gallops along and you know that something things have to move quickly. So with Jenny, for example, you talk about the romance between her and the police detective. In if it wasn't for lockdown, it might take a lot longer. You might take her for dinner. You might, well, the normal things people do, but he's got like a day to make his mind up. So he says, "Do you want to come and live at my house?" See how things go. So it does create lots and lots of opportunities to pack a lot of action and a lot of content into a short space of time. But the other reason I chose lockdown is I think when at the time I was writing it, I was reading everything I could find by Tom Wolfe because I read the first of all the Bonfire Banshees and I just thought this is fantastic. And the foreword to the Bonfire of the Banshees is well worth reading just in its own right because Wolfe explains that um, he's of the school of social realism, and he said it's missing. Since the 1960s, it's been disappearing. And he said, but in the way like Dickens recorded Victorian London or Zola Paris, he said we need people today to chronicle our own age, and that's what he tried to do with Bonfire of the Vanities, which is about racial tensions in New York in the 1980s. So I think in the present climate, we've got to be very, very careful just how far we go with that. Well, I mean, a novelist has to do because you just won't get published or you get cancelled pretty quickly. But I still think a novelist has a duty to set a story in a recognizable context. Otherwise, you may as well have it in the Kalahari Desert. So I wanted to recreate England in 2020. On the eve of lockdown, so people can understand, can say, yes, that's what it was like. We remember that, and then all the kind of and a little bit of a hint of some of the other kind of phenomena, social realities that were existing at the time. So you have there's a character in there which called Ali Khan, who's a member of a grooming gang in Bradford who has two children that he considers his property, and it's not an attack on Muslims. It's not or it's Islamophobic in any way. It's just a recreation of the kind of criminal gang that you would find in the here and now, in the same way that Dickens, wrote about Fagin and the pickpocket. There was the pickpockets in the Oliver Twist. So I think I'd rather take the chance of trying to make my novels setting them in a realistic context and having identifiable characters and identifiable social context and being cancelled than pretend that these things didn't happen. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so the first one you're dealing with the the scandal of people being prematurely bumped off by the NHS. Second one was lockdown, and the one I'm working on now is going to be in 2023, which well, we only have to look back and see what's happening in 2023 to guess what I'm going to be writing about.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your next novel at the end. Let's talk
Yeah,
about some
sure.
of these. What would you call it? These are sort of topical themes that you weave into this mystery. So one of them is grooming of children. Not in this novel, not just for sex, but also as essentially slaves. So they they're dragged around by this criminal gang to do um, I'm on page 33, for instance. She'll help the big lad shift rubble, tidy up, and keep us in brews and sausage rolls. So she's a slave, not just a sex slave. So she's Ali's sex slave. And by the way, I'm going to second you when you say it's not anti-Muslim because, unfortunately, that particular girl she does get exploited by the non-Muslim members,
Yeah.
some of them. I'm not going to, not all of them. I'm not going to give it away, but she gets exploited by the non-Muslim members of the criminal gang to which she is exposed to, and that's kind of inevitable in that sort of uh, slavery enslaved situation with no public oversight. I mean, there's two forms of non-public oversight here,
Hmm.
which is public authorities were asleep on the job, or not just asleep on the job, they were biased against investigating these terrible crimes because they didn't want to be accused of being racist, given that most of the perpetrators, almost all of them, were second generation Muslim, Pakistanis, and
Yeah.
Afghanis. So there's lack of exposure through public authorities, but most of the enslavement is going on underground in this particular novel
Yeah.
because the criminal gang is digging. They're digging for gold, and they're hiding from the authorities in these tunnels that you describe. But by the way, there's a second um, controversial mm, uh, what would call it issue. It's an issue. I'm just going to call it an issue, which
Yeah.
is transgenderism. You
Yeah.
you weave that in too because you've got one of the criminal gang escapes from. Tell me if I'm giving away too much, but he
No, no, not
escapes
at all.
from
Not at
from
all.
custody. He escapes from
Yeah.
custody by pretending to be a woman, and
Yeah.
actually, in the novel, it seems that he actually genuinely at, at times. So he switches back and forth between male and female as convenient, but it's not just convenience. He seems to genuinely um, believe that he is transgender at times, but at the same time he's genuinely exploiting this. So when he's on the move under police custody, he's railing against the police for misgendering him, and he's just totally exploiting the situation. So
Yeah.
two topical things which are easy to bring up into public and then get cancelled for. Um, you know, to tell us why you went where you had the courage to raise both of those.
Yeah, because well, they're very much at the forefront of news over the last few years, and were at that time. um, well, it was very, very controversial for male prisoners who to claim that they're female and be transferred from male prisons to female prisons, and some of them were rapists. And you got to remember this brought down Nicola Sturgeon. Well, I wrote all this stuff about Rocky. The character's called Rocco Snot, and in the underworld he's known as Rocky Snot. But he was I wrote all that before Nicola Sturgeon busted, was disgraced and ended up resigning. Because it was just so it was just there. It was right at the forefront of the news, and you could see that people were getting obsessed about it and people being cancelled. But I had to try and do it in a way which is authentic, because I knew that if I was challenged, I'd have to defend myself. And with Rocky, he isn't trans. He is a fake. He's not. He doesn't believe he's transsexual. He's been told that this is what he's got to do because the gang wants to spring him from jail because they want to use him on the job, and he's also a threat to them because he knows who they are and what they've done previously, and he's aware of that. That comes out later in the book. So they want him out of jail and using him and knowing where he is when they want to get rid of him, if they wanted to get rid of him. He yeah he's so I just wanted to show that this kind of manipulation does go on. Criminals will, unscrupulous people will pretend to be, will work the system, but pretend to be women or anything else if they think it will benefit them, and that's what Rocky does in this story. I don't think it's
Yeah.
even controversial to say that anymore. I think everybody can see it with their own
Yeah,
eyes.
yeah, and it's certainly authentic. So I had most exposure to this in academia, where the probably the semantic ways that men would exploit this fake female identity in order to get privileges. That I think it kind of started in academia, and then prisoners, as you say, took advantage of it. So there's Rocky is having these arguments with the female police officer. I think that's also interesting. So when you first meet Rocky, Rocky is being released. He's been transferred supposedly between
Yeah,
prisons, and there are two police officers who are doing the escorting. One is male, one is female, and it's the female that he attacks. Rocky attacks.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
which is very authentic because this is the irony of this of the feminist um uh the feminist arm that supports transgenderism. They end up regressing female rights. They are the ones targeted as not being authentically female enough by men pretending to be female. So there's some great quotes in this argument between the female officer and Rocky. It goes on a few pages. She's being transphobic. I want an apology. You said I'd only come as a woman, meaning that I was just pretending. You misgendered me. Very authentic language I remember from academia, and it goes on and on. She's abusing me. This is violence, and that brings out that nonsense, that words of violence thing
yeah.
that was emerging in the 2020s. Sorry, in 2020, where the novel is set. And you probably, I should ask you this. You probably were exposed with this as a journalist. You must have been covering some of these cases.
Yeah, I mean, I've written about it here and there, I'm not. I mean, I I worked for the Daily Mail up to about 2012, and I didn't do an awful lot for them, I must admit. And then as a freelancer, I've done like comment pieces, but I've not been actually out in the. I've kind of more followed it to be honest. I've just followed what I've been reading and what about in the media, both online and in newspapers, and of course what happened with J.K. Rowling as well, and some of the other people, some of the other writers who were cancelled. I mean, they couldn't cancel J.K. Rowling; she was too big to be cancelled. But there were lesser well-known authors who basically were ditched by their agents and the publishers. So no, I just took an interest. And the other thing about Rocky as well is in that particular sense, the part that you're referring to is he's able to call this police officer, this woman police officer, all kinds of names. That had
Including
he been,
turf,
yeah,
turf, and
taunting about her weight and about how she
yeah,
smells, and
yeah,
had he been straight
yeah.
white male, he would never have got away with.
That's right.
And
Yeah,
she gets no sympathy at all from her colleague.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because she's not playing the game from the male colleague's perspective. This is, you got to play the game at least. Yeah, maybe the male officer is convinced of the transgender dogma, but it's like, we, just you are the problem here. That's what the male officer says to the female officer. You are the problem. You're winding him up, winding her up.
yeah, I was. I mean, no, I just remembered actually. I did actually. The Harry. I can't remember his last name now. The police officer who sued the police after he got a knock on the door and was told that they wanted to check his language, and he's a former
Yeah,
police officer out in Lincolnshire somewhere.
yeah,
He'll come back to me as soon as I'm sure as soon as you turn the camera off, he'll come back to me. And I was a part of a commission that interviewed him, and he told me about in great detail for an organisation which is collecting evidence of discrimination against Christians, and he's like a nonconformist Christian, a Baptist or something like that. And he gave evidence to this commission, and I was serving as a commissioner, and he was he was talking about the obligation that they have. Positive obligation was the phrase he used. That if a
it
police
was
officer
Harry
hears
Miller, but it was
Harry
Harry
Miller,
Miller.
Harry
Yeah,
Miller, yes, it's Harry Miller. He said that the police have a positive obligation to report on each other, to inform to the superiors if they hear another police officer use
yeah,
transphobic language. And that's what comes up in the story where after Rocky's bolted and the two of them, the police officers are left standing alone looking at each other. The man turns to the woman and said, "I'm going to report you for this, for what you've
yeah,
done to him, for what you've said to him. We have a positive obligation to do that." So
yeah.
it kind of brings out the madness of our times. I mean, that was partly my
Was
purpose, but
mad. Yeah,
I don't
and that
try, I
was
don't overrate it.
yeah, that was true in academia too. You had a
Yeah,
positive obligation to make these reports, and obviously it created moral dilemmas where you you as the victim, you were constantly self-censoring as an academic. I was one of the victims. I was constantly self-censoring, less I think second guessing how I could be not just misinterpreted but deliberately misrepresented by people
yeah,
as being phobic to this or that. And then obviously other people can exploit it by saying, well, they just don't like you for some reason. Like in my case of being white and male, just poised, ready, just thinking, how can I exploit him? How can I exploit him? So that was true in academia at the time.
yeah.
And I wish I'd got it out. It was mad times. I mean, it just got madder under lockdown. Lockdown sort of
Yeah.
drove people to amplify and reveal much of the madness that
Yes,
had.
it was a
Uh,
catalyst, wasn't it, for
yeah,
what was just under the surface, all
yeah.
exploded.
So there's a third aspect to the madness of the time, which I did want to mention, which is schooling and teaching. And
Yeah,
you've got one teacher character in the novel who is Anna, who's a very interesting character. She has a mysterious background. She has a we can say she has a foreign background, and she
yeah,
becomes um, pertinent to the wider mystery of the gold um, in a way you can explain. But the madness of schooling is exposed in how um, Anna has an interaction with an assistant teacher, whatever they call them now, which sort of exposes this sort of second guessing. Anna is this model teacher apparently
yeah,
at the beginning, and it exposes some of the second guessing that goes on even in the lowest schooling system. So in America we call it K through 12, but secondary,
yeah,
primary, and secondary. So she's at a primary school, and then you do. This is what I admire about the novel. You rapidly insert these subtle commentaries about where society's gone wrong. So one of them, I'm just going to pick up one of them. It's on page 67, where uh, Anna is concerned about a child that looks sleepy in the classroom and said, "What time did you go to bed?" "Don't know, miss. It's my ma'am. She was on the game all night," which
yeah,
sounds like she was prostituting
yeah,
herself. But Anna said, "On the game. What do you mean?" "Yes, miss. Foxy Bingo, miss. Foxy Bingo with this app, mobile phone app game, gambling game.
yes,
And it's very subtle because you just move on, but it speaks to a theme from the Beast of Bethulia Park, which is that people are getting diverted by these pointless addictions and sometimes
yeah.
very self-destructive addictions.
Yes, absolutely. Again, I wanted to have a classroom which was authentic and a profile of people which was authentic. I think I've actually understated how bad it actually is. I think it's a lot worse than that. My wife's a teacher. I mean, I'm not saying she works at a very nice school, but she knows other teachers, and I also have friends who are teachers, and they tell me all kinds of things. And they said what they tell me all the time is like it's almost like every year it gets worse. Every year there are more children on the special needs spectrum. They're being medicalized with all kinds of conditions. Nobody seems to know what it is. Um, the and also the profile of the parents. There's so many of them. Um, the white native ones, if you want to call that, the white English, they don't seem to get married anymore. They might have one. They might have children by different fathers. If they bother at all, uh, well, obviously they bother if they've got the parents in the first place. But it's what we would have in the past called dysfunctional, and so there's not many children being born, and those who are being born, a lot of them are born into very troubled households. And even the parents who do behave responsibly are wondering why the child's autistic or why the child has ADHD or that kind of stuff. So there's an awful lot happening in the classroom at the moment. Even today, there's You see, there was a report in the Daily Mail yesterday, I think, and we've certainly have seen it on the Conservative Woman website where people, or sorry, the Autism Tribune, where they said that there just isn't enough places for these children. There's so many children with difficulties that the schools no longer have enough places. So what on earth is going on? So with that particular chapter, what I did was try to show that first of all that there's a hint that there's more and more migrants coming in. I'm completely neutral in that I don't offer a moral opinion or a political opinion. I just make the observation that as the whites are declining, they're being replaced by people from overseas, from or or whether it's be continental Europe, Far East, India, Africa, and that there are an awful lot of children within that classroom who have difficulties as a result of some kind of medical or developmental difficulties or difficulties within the home life. But like I say, it's all it's more background rather than the main plot. It's just a kind of a spotlight into what a classroom at that time might have looked like. And I had like my wife's a primary school teacher, so I said like, can you read this? Can you have a look at this? Is it right? And she has a look at it. Yeah, she wouldn't do that with a coat or it's just like minor details. So but in the end, she said, yeah, that's what it's like.
Yeah.
So
So the other comment about modern Britain is about policing, and that carries over
yeah,
from the Beast of Bethulia Park, where the police don't look good. They're you could say they're corrupt. They're at least inattentive to the crimes in the hospital, and they are corrupted by personal relationships with the perpetrators. In this book, you've got more of the police are presented more in the way of the authoritarian police that we're now used to, we've normalized to in
yeah,
Britain, that where the police are using lockdown as they did to intimidate people. In the context of this novel, um, Jenny, who is the journalist, she is intimidated several times about where she gets her information, which actually carries over from the Beast of Bethulia Park. She's intimidated there too about her sources. We need to know your sources. And there's a great quote on page 208: "You underestimate my powers." This this
yeah,
this threatening arrogance, where the police are as uh, see themselves more from the perspective of how they can get what they want rather than whom they serve.
yes, that's right. Well, Jenny's first encounter with the police in this book is, I think it's in chapter 4, called "The Wood," where she's tipped off by Emerald that because Emerald witnesses the chase of a man called well she witnesses a man dying. He's been stabbed, and she alerts the police, and then she also tells Jenny, who's a friend, and so Jenny gets there before the police have even issued the statement to the press that there's been a murder. So she turns up, and it's a rainy morning. It's in a real place. I mean, people locally know, when we've read the book, know what I'm talking about. They know exactly what this hill is called, where it is, and even the field. You can drive past the field and see where it's set. And she gets there, and it's all cordoned off, and the police and the forensic people are there. And she asks if she can speak to the chief investigating officer. And when he comes over with a junior officer, he's quite rude to her, and he obfuscates and he misleads and he menaces and he puts her down. And then she makes the mistake of misgendering Rocky, and he's down on her like a ton of bricks, and he's threatening to destroy her career. And to record her as having committed a non-crime hate incident. Her comments. He wants to record as non-crime hate incident, which can stop you progressing your career. It can affect you in many different ways, even though you haven't actually committed a criminal offence. And she's a bit flabbergasted. She comes away completely demoralised and feels like giving up. And and she it affects the way she writes the story, goes about writing the story. But then when she recovers from that, she's stronger, and she says, I'm not going to let them do that to me again. So the next time they start to threaten her, she stands up to them. So that incidentally slightly mirrors the treatment of Alison Pearson of the Daily Telegraph, who made a comment on Twitter, which led to her being getting a visit from, I think it was Essex police, and accused, and they made, they were going to record it as a hate crime incident as well. And but luckily she had the Daily Telegraph to fight her corner, but it was hugely controversial and just showed just how the police seems to be more, not every force, but a majority of them, I'd say, think their job is to police politics and police thought rather than police crime.
Mm.
And we've seen that all the time. This outcry over two-tier policing.
Yeah.
They've been captured ideologically, I think, and people, and that's why people are again so obsessed about it. I think there's an article in one of today's papers saying that the complaints against the police at the moment are at record levels, something like 94,000 or something, because they don't seem to want to police without without fear and favor. They or to catch the perpetrators, protect the poor and protect the public. I mean, I'm sure they do that as well, but there's an increasing tendency to police Twitter and to arrest people for saying things, to express themselves in a way which goes against the political grain.
Yeah. They've got their priorities wrong, so they
Yeah,
see themselves
yeah,
more as social engineers than crime fighters. And your novel brings out some of that theme. So, for instance, I recall Jenny losing her temper with Inspector Tarleton. I think
yeah.
he was an inspector or detective
DI, yeah,
inspector.
yeah,
Yeah, and she loses her temper and she says, "When did you police decide that your job is to terrorize the public?"
yeah,
And it's a great line because essentially police are terrorizing the public. We're all self-censoring in case we get a knock on the door from the police, who can be very invasive. They will abuse their powers by entering your home without a warrant. And it's very difficult to, Americans will be surprised by this. It's very difficult to then um, try any recourse for that. It's,
yeah,
you have to privately sue them, which is
yeah.
expensive, in order to prove that they abuse their powers. It's a ridiculous
And
situation
they'll take all your electrical devices off you as well. So they take all your
without a warrant.
without
Yeah,
a warrant. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So they're
It's
behaving like
shocking.
the checker. Yeah.
Yeah. There's another commentary on the police, which I loved because it reminded me of the madness of the 2020 era. You have this poor abbess, um, Mother El is it Mother Eleanor?
Mother
The
Eleanor, yeah, Eleanor
Yeah,
Boffin.
Mother Eleanor. So
Yeah,
she is the victim of a theft,
yeah,
and she's calling the police, and they don't answer the phone, which is unfortunately typical too. Even the emergency number with certain constabularies, like Dorset, where I was living, Dorset constabulary wouldn't answer the phone even if you're calling the emergency number. You would wait tens of minutes, and then you go through the rigmarole that they'll put you through. So she didn't get to talk to a police officer. She spoke to a civilian administrator called Ferdy.
yeah,
This is making me laugh because it's infuriating, but it's funny at the same time. And his first question is, "What gender are you, madam?" And of course, she's
yeah,
infuriated.
yeah,
So, what question is that? I'm an abbess, the mother superior.
yeah.
But
That's
still,
brilliant.
Ferdy insists that she specifies what gender she is.
Yeah. Well, that's it's slightly based on fact there, because I've made a yeah, I've known a few. I've known a few nuns in my time because I've worked on the Catholic press, and you know, some of them have lived in the cloister communities for so long that there was one woman I was particularly fond of, called Joanna Jameson, who was a Benedictine in Was in North Yorkshire, and she entered the convent in the 1950s, and she came, and in the noughties she came up, she retired. She'd been the Mother Superior several times, and she'd hit the 70s. And before she became a nun, she was an artist, and she trained at Glasgow School of Art. And she's great at these wall murals. So the Sunday Times did a big special on her. She was in her 80s, and she did this fantastic mural across the size of a building on stepladders, even though she was so old. And they thought it was quite funny that this is a woman who'd never heard a record by the Beatles, never seen a James Bond film. So that was always in my mind when I was writing about Mother's boffing. She's all of a sudden she might have joined the convent in the 1970s or something like that, and all of a sudden she's connecting with the outside world, and all they want to know is, what gender are you? And she's clearly a woman, and she just can't believe that she's being asked this question. So this is like it's somebody came from outer space. So it helps to drive home the madness of the era, but it is slightly based on fact in that in 2016 I tried to contact the police about an incident where my family had been victims of crime, and I went through all this process. I rang them up, struggling to get through to somebody who take me seriously. Then I get the civilian administrator, and I asked all these questions. What ethnicity are you? What's your gender? And they when I did to kind of get round to talking about the crime, they just sounded bored. so his real life has kind of fed into that particular scene.
Yeah, and another question Dorset police used to ask was, "Do you feel safe at home?" Right. So you could be complaining about a road traffic accident away from your home, and you'll be asked, "Do you feel safe in your home?" Oh, just record the crime. And but we
Uh,
haven't mentioned. I think we mentioned this in our this perverse incentive in our previous discussion about the Beast of Bethulia Park, where the police are disincentivized from recording crime. And
yeah,
implicitly, one of the ways they can disincentivize you is not picking up the phone when
yeah,
you call even the emergency line, and then when they do speak to you, going through all these stupid questions before they will record the crime.
yeah. That's right. So it's worth getting in, getting it
Yeah,
down. This is the
yeah.
age we live in.
So I think I've got three themes that I'd like to discuss with you in the book because they are unusual in novel, and at least in any novel, but particularly novels that are published by the big presses. I don't think these themes would get in there. The first one, I'm just going to mention the organized the organized criminal gang includes some veterans of the Iraq
Yes.
War, and it's it, there's two aspects to why they should be there. One is that they discover information while they are in Iraq about that suggests something about Lady Mabel's gold. So there's you can specify there's some documentation which suggests that there's that gold left Mesopotamia and became Lady Mabel's gold. So there's veterans. That's one reason why veterans are in the gang, because they discovered this information. The other theme, you tell me if I'm wrong, it speaks to the idea that veterans are traumatized and
Yeah.
they might turn to crime for their trauma because they're traumatized. What else do they do? What if you're a skilled warrior and you return to civilian life? What else are you good for apart from organized crime? There's that sort of stereotype, and then also some of their skills. One of them is an engineer, so he has explosive skills, which become useful to the gang. You is there anything you were trying to comment on about the the new veteran demographic in British society since the wars of the 2000s?
Yeah, the last thing I'd want to do is suggest that veterans are becoming criminal. And I had to kind of be a little bit sensitive when I was writing that, but I think the value in having the veterans in the gang is because of the skills that they bring. And there were actually two who were in the Royal Engineers. There was the Charlie Backhurst, who appears in chapter 2 and is subsequently murdered. And then there's Digger Denton, who's his colleague. Um, yeah, I think it's because of the quest for the gold and the use that these people, these soldiers, these former soldiers are bring to the gang, especially the two brothers who run it, that justifies them being there because they're extremely skilled, they're brave, they understand weaponry, they've been out in Iraq, they've been out in Syria. Part of the story talks about how they were looking for the treasure and evidence of the treasure in Iraq while the war was on. So they needed people like that who could move around Iraq. And at the time they were after they'd been in the British Army, they joined these private security companies so that they could continue to look at various sites and to smuggle artifacts out. And because they were being paid by a very, very wealthy man to do that. In drawing the characters, I had to be very, very careful again because I don't know many Royal Engineers. I've met one quite recently, and I must admit I felt extremely sorry for him. He was he must have had some exposure to life-threatening explosions because he's told me that he was 65% of his body was burnt. He still had his limbs intact, and he couldn't go out on bonfire night. He had to sit there with earphones on because the sound of them, the bang set him off. I think he's probably getting helped in one way or another. So I have nothing but sympathy for people like that who've been out there like, putting their lives on the line for the country, and I wouldn't like to defame any of them. These particular characters are they're looking for treasure. I mean, Charlie Beckhurst isn't traumatized. He wants the gold. He wants the money, and so does Digger Denton because Digger Denton's got it mostly for private reasons. He's estranged from his wife, who seems to have given up hope on him. You know, he wants to get back with her. He wants to see his kids, and he thinks that if he goes home with his pockets full of cash, he can start from afresh. So even though if I had the kind of a big publishing house which would have allowed me to write 800 pages, you know, like Donna Tartt, something like that, I could have gone into the backgrounds a lot more, but I've had to kind of condense them and let what my son told me is lore, Lore, do the rest. But Digger, I wanted to project as a kind of in a sympathetic way because he's one of these characters, even though he's in a criminal gang and who've done some pretty awful things, his heart's good and he cares for the children who are slaves and it matters to him that they're being abused and he doesn't want to see it. And that finds its fulfillment towards the end of the book when he takes action to remedy that. As you know, I don't want to give too much away. So so I hope that people, when they read that, will think that, you know, Charlie maybe you might come away thinking it's a neutral character, but with Diggy you would probably think he was all right, he was good, even though he was in with the wrong people.
Yeah, I got you. So so the second theme I want to talk of the final three is religion. So religion is important here. A lot of the characters are in religious orders. So Father Calvin comes back. You've got the abbess, and the abbess is pertinent because there's a relationship with Lady Mabel historically, institutionally. But the most profound religious trajectory for me was Rocky's. And it's a very interesting one. It was not one I expected. There's a lot of surprises for me in this book. I haven't mentioned this enough, how mysterious, how surprising this book. I'm very rarely surprised when I read fiction. It's all too predictable to me, particularly when the publishing industry has been taken over by the woke and there's a formula, which is we got to comment about how bad racism is here, and then we'll comment about how bad sexism is here, and the female of color is going to triumph in the end, and all the baddies are white males. It's very formulaic. So there's you know, that's an additional reason why fiction is no longer surprising. There's a lot of complexity in this book, which I love. So Rocky's trajectory really surprised me. So he is a bad guy. You know, he slashed Emerald's throat in the backstory. He's exploiting transgenderism to get out of jail. He busts out of jail, out of police custody. He joins the gang, and yet the gang doesn't treat him right, he has some sort of realization. He has sympathy for the child slaves. He thieves from the abbess, but regrets it. And he has in what he thieves is this cross, this very expensive
Yeah.
cross that hung around the abbess's neck. And in trying to decipher, just looking at the imagery, including the text, it creates a religious awakening which isn't quite fulfilled. He doesn't. You tell me if I'm wrong, but he's clearly exploring his spirituality as awakened or reawakened by this cross, and yet for various reasons I don't want to give away, he doesn't get a chance to conclude this reawakening, whatever we call it. Tell us what you were trying to convey through Rocky.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, I didn't want to be predictable. So, I mean, I suppose you could say, well, when a character enters the book so horribly, you may well get some surprises because. So yeah, when he enters the book, he's bad. You know, you have Charlie Backus in chapter 2. Oh no, you're not Rock. What are you doing bringing Rocky Snot on the job? And he's been involved in an earlier job to steal a scroll from a footballer's house in which the footballer was quite savagely maimed, and his wife was raped. Celebrity wife was raped, and he was a gang of 3 people who did that, and the other 2 are dead. One was stabbed in Wakefield. The other one hanged himself soon after his trial. I can't remember exactly when I said it. So Rocky's the last man standing. So he's got a terrible reputation. But it emerges throughout the story that what he witnessed in the house that night revolted him, and he's obviously had time to think about that. And he kills the man once he's out of jail. So you still think that he might be bad news, but then you see him turn around and look after the boy who's on the floor, whose hands are cut, and he dresses the child's hands and makes sure he's all right. So that's the first indication that there's something going on with Rocky. And then you get a better indication when he's alone with the girl who has been groomed by Ali Khan, and she, like a lot of these children, they think that the groomer, the person that's exploited, is the boyfriend, and this person loves him, loves her, and he's going to look after her and all this kind of stuff. And Rocky was one of the first people to say something like, no, he's not. You know, this guy's destroying your future. He's stealing your soul. And he uses those words to her. And he makes the offer and said, come away with me. We'll both break out. We'll go somewhere else. And I don't want to ruin too much then, but he say too much because I don't want to ruin it for the reader. But as you've already said, he steals the cross, and the sight of the cross has an impact. I mean, the seeds of a religious awakening are already there, because you can see that he's following his conscience, and that he wants to do good instead of doing evil. And then when he sees this cross, it has this kind of supernatural effect on him. And in some ways, what inspired me with that is I wrote about Siegfried Sassoon, the war poet, about 10 years ago when the Great War was on. And Sassoon, he's my favorite of all the war poets, and I love his books as well. I thought the Memoirs of a Fox Hunting Man was just absolutely fantastic, brilliant, and he's such a great writer. In 2015, it's about the 100 years of one of the big battles. It might have been the Somme or something. I decided to write a piece about the war poets, and I was put in touch with a woman who actually knew Sassoon. I went out to see him. She just cycled out, and when she was a 17-year-old girl, to his house in Heytesbury, and he let her in, stay for a few days, and they chatted about all kinds of things. And I did this piece about, a nice feature, good sort of like solid 1,500 word feature about Sassoon, and I read up quite a bit about Sassoon. And in the last 10 years of his life, he converted to Catholicism, and it was quite a shocking conversion, because he spent an awful lot of his time as an active homosexual. He had quite a few famous relationships. I think he had Ivan Novello, and he also, I think in his 40s, he was driving around with a man in his 20s who was dressed like a woman. He was quite shameless. This is when it was all illegal. And then he decides that he wants to marry and have a child, which is a bit sort of uh, unexpected. And then he treats his wife quite horribly, and then he decides that he's going to become a Catholic. Didn't even tell his wife or his son. He just went off and did it. And some of the nuns were a little bit skeptical about his conversion. Others thought it was sincere. But then I was talking to one nun. No, I was handed a book by a woman who'd written about him, and she describes how in the final years of his life he would just kneel before a cross. He couldn't express himself any way. It's just this view of a cross, and he would kneel, and it's like he said, his entire meaning of his life, of everything that had been before, had found fulfillment in this cross. And that's why that's what I was thinking when I wrote about Rocky. Rocky's in a lot of trouble, and he's alone, and he's got this cross, and it's the focus of his attention, in the same way as it was with Sassoon in the twilight of his life.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not the same. You might think, how do you get from that point to that point? But it's embedded in your imagination. This image, of a man kind of converting just at the sight of a cross and wanting to put all his emotional and spiritual energy into what that means.
Yeah, I totally follow it. All right, so the final character I want to talk about is
Yeah,
Jenny. So Rocky, I thought about to Rocky and Jenny were the two I thought about most. I'm not sure which of those I can place at top of my thoughtfulness, Rocky or Jenny. They both have very interesting, surprising trajectories. I thought about Rocky in a different way to Jenny. So Rocky has a surprising sort of conversion or re turnaround. Let's call it a turnaround.
yeah,
Jenny does not have a turnaround, and it kind of, she bothered me more, ironically, than Rocky did. So we discussed this about we discussed Jenny in the context of the Beast of Bethulia Park. I found Jenny difficult to reconcile in the Beast of Bethulia Park, and I found her even more difficult to reconcile in Lady Mabel's Gold.
yeah,
She's and this is why it's important, because the book Lady Mabel's Gold ends with mostly about Jenny and mostly
yeah,
about Jenny's engineering of a happy ending for her. But I am uncomfortable with it.
yeah,
So in the Beast of Bethulia Park, I didn't like Jenny's adultery. Clearly she is a sympathetic character. She clearly cares about good journalism. She is well motivated to discover the truth about those deaths, uh, uh, illegal deaths, suspicious deaths are really murders, as we eventually know in Beast of Bethulia Park, and she's well motivated in Lady Mabel's Gold to investigate further murders in this context, and yet I find her quite exploitative. And
yeah,
towards the end of the book, I don't want to give too much away, but we've mentioned before she is invited into a lockdown situation by a detective with explicit romantic potential. And you, again, in Lady Mabel's Gold, you switch to the first person when she's sort of writing. It's almost like a diary narrative, but she's writing
yeah,
her own narrative in certain chapters, which is a very interesting choice. And in her sort of first person chapters, clearly she's engineering a situation which I find quite selfish at times. She wants a father for a son. So she's had the son that was conceived in the previous novel in adulterously while she was engaged to another man, and the father is one of the doctors who was involved in the murders, who is now dead. She gives away the son. Then she sort of, she clearly she cares about the son, but she's also trying to rebuild her journalistic career and so forth. So she's not, she's, it's not as if she's totally obsessed with regaining the son. Then she decides she wants the son back, but she also wants a father for the son, and she's going to pick on this detective. That detective is the one that she's going to
yeah,
decide is the father, and it's kind of exploitative. And I was uncomfortable, and in her first person narrative, she's discussing with herself how she is going to seduce the detective. Um,
yeah.
I was uncomfortable with it. I've said enough. You tell me, what were you trying to do with Jenny?
Yeah, I think that the Detective Inspector Tarleton was a real person. He'd agree with you. So yeah, she's an awful. No, because she also describes that she how frustrated she was by the fact that he ignores her for months or for weeks while they were living in this house, and she's wearing all these short shorts and low cut tops, and he's driving. He's driving her mad that he's not paying making a pass towards her. So he obviously has his doubts about her, but he takes a big chance with her, and it's a lot of that really is trying to build up the character of Tar. So I want, as well as Jenny, I wanted to show him as a forgiving, a good cop, a man who was willing to forgive because the father of this, and to take on this child who's actually the father, whose real father is his wife's lover, or was what his wife's lover, and so he forgives an awful lot to give this woman the stability that she wants, that she's craving. So he's spent some time, because it's Jenny in the first person. You don't get to see what's going on in his head, but you can tell from his actions that he's taking his time to think about, to weigh up the balance. Is this something I want to do? Should I do it? And in the end, he decides that it is, to his credit, and he comes out as a strong and sympathetic character for doing so. Yeah, Jenny isn't a saint. She's a woman who's made a lot of bad choices. She means well, but she's got a selfish streak. She's somebody who likes pleasure. She likes sex, and she likes things the way, to get things just as she wants them to be. But we all know people like that. It's the way the world is. So Jenny is on a journey of self-discovery and maturity, and she's kind of moving away from like the kind of the frivolity of youth to kind of more stable life, where she's moving into her 30s, and she wants stability. She's going to wants to be a good wife, and she wants to be a good mother to the child, and of course she wants to have a career back. She wants if people can have all these things, they will. They won't let them slide go away. But my son read the book, and he's only 16 now. So he read it when he must have been, what, 14, 15, when I gave him a draft of Lady Mabel's Call. And I said, "What do you think of that?" And he's quite a bright kid, so he was able to go off and read it and think about it. And he came back and he just said, "Jenny," he says she's horrible. He said that is how. He said, "If I had to draw an unlikable character," he said, "that's how you do it." And I said, "Come on, she's not that bad." But he really actually thought that. But I don't think she's all that bad. I'm quite fond of Jenny in my own way. I think she's not deliberately nasty. She like you say, she wants to do the right thing. And sometimes she does buck the trend. She's not, for the fact that she wants a father for a son. It would be not, if you took a mainstream novel, you write the male character. I don't need a father myself. This is what society's telling people all the time. Men are redundant. But she says, "No, I'm not going to do this on my own. My boy needs a dad." So it shows a strength of character, and also the way that she does stand up to the police when they're bullying her. She gets bullied on 3 occasions by the police. The first time she was overwhelmed, and it was unexpected, and that's by the detective investigating the murder at the woodshed. Then Tarleton comes onto her very, very strongly, threatening to turn her parents' house upside down and take away all her gadgets, and she stands up to him. And then towards the end, "I want to know how you know this happened before we released it," that kind of thing. "What are your sources?" And again, it comes at a time when she'd agreed to move in with him, and he'd invited her to move in, and she agreed to move in, and then he demands to know sources, and she says, "No, I'm not going to tell you." And he said, "Right, it's off." So she stood by her principles, even at risk of losing everything. And luckily for her, he gives her a second chance.
Yeah.
So she's not all bad. She's complicated. But the thing is, if you're going to have interesting stories, you can't just have virtuous characters or just bad characters. You've got to kind of mix them up a little bit. Graham Greene said, he said, "It's not black and white. There's black and shades of grey," and that's a little bit how I think of the world. Even Calvin, Calvin. I've been criticised for um, being a bit loose with Calvin. The fact that he's still attracted to Emerald, and there are some scenes in there where he shows a real weakness, where he even thinks about marrying her, and I've been criticised for that. But I think you've got to be realistic and see that a collar or a cowl doesn't make you any less of a man. You're still going to have these emotions, and you've got to show people as the world is and people as they might be. It's up to us, really. It's up to each and every individual to follow their own conscience and make moral choices as you know as they arise in response to situations as they arise. And sometimes people don't always get it right. So
Yeah, well, I love the complexity of the characters. I found them very authentic. They made me think a lot, which I rarely say about a novel. And then the complexity of the stories itself, and the themes, the commentary that you weave into that, it's all very impressive. I love this book, and in fact, it's a book I want to read a second time because the
thank you.
complexity uh, stimulates me to to think more about it by reading it a second time. And I almost never read uh, novels a second time. In fact, people have heard me say in other contexts, Evelyn Waugh, P.G. Wodehouse, those are really the only authors I read more than once. So I love this book. We should just end by saying there is, in the end, it's about where is Lady Mabel's gold and what is the nature of it. We're not going to give that away.
No, that's right.
But that's the overarching theme. You mentioned the final chapter returns to the medieval story, bookends the book with the medieval mystery, um, which is an additional theme we're not going to discuss further because
Yeah. There's a
that's the
final
key
twist
mystery.
right on
That
the very last
it
page. There's
it
a
is
final
a
twist.
twist. We're kind of giving things away, Simon, by saying there is a
Yeah,
twist.
don't read the last
There
page.
there is a twist. That's as far that's as far as we should go.
Yeah.
I was surprised even there. I just want to make that note. Love the book, Simon. Well done.
Thank you very much
Let's
indeed. I
talk
really
about your
appreciate it.
next novel, sir.
Yeah, it's in the early days. I took 6 months off after writing Lady Mabel's Gold because I was exhausted. It really knocked the stuff out of me. I'm sure I aged 10 years writing it. It's hard to describe. I mean, I think Orwell once said, writing a novel is a bit like having a debilitating illness that's long for a long time. I don't think
Or
it's
or
that
or
bad.
being pregnant for
Yeah,
several years.
yeah, something like that. But I don't think something like that. But I kind of get what he means. But it's a hyperbole. But I understand it. So after that, after I launched Lady Mabel's Gold at the end of March, and I thought I was just going to take the summer off. But all the time I'm thinking, and now I'm on with book three, and it's the same characters again, but I was struggling to get past chapter one because Jenny's in such a kind of stable existence now. She's married and she's got a child, and um, you know, it, just everything's okay. So you can think, well, how do I make it not okay? So, well, it's not. But no, it's set in 2023, and it's I've got some very interesting villains and some very interesting ideas when I can get it down. And I do. Again, I want to show Britain what it's like in the year before the general election, the year before the Southport killing. So all that context is going to be there. Um, just going back to a religious point, one of the layers in each of the first two books is right from the beginning when I wrote the Beast of Bethulia Park. Emerald Essien, we haven't spoke much about her in today, but she's very very prominent in both novels and very more prominent perhaps in the Beast of Bethulia Park. Well, she's an allegory of Judith of Bethulia in that book where she's the I think I might have mentioned this before, where she's Calvin sees her certainly as a type of Judith who defeats the Assyrian general in the Bible, and liberates the Israelites from a man who's going to exterminate them. So Emerald is an allegory of that. Um, these three books that I'm talking about now, each one of them has a layer in which explores one of the great heroines of the Old Testament. So in the Beast of Bethulia Park, it's Judith of Bethulia. In Lady Mabel's Gold is Queen Esther, because there's a very, very clear layer running right from the beginning of Esther, and it pertains mostly to the children who are slaves and the release from slavery. And there is a figure, an allegory of Esther there, but a very unlikely one. It's very oblique. And the final one is Susanna. So in the book I'm working on now, it's going to be a retelling of Susanna, and Jenny is the allegory of Susanna, the good wife who's accused of adultery. So positive, of course. So that gives you a little hint of what's going to be going on in the final one.
When do you think you'll publish?
Well, I'm hoping to get it written next year. It's going quite well now. Now that I've finally I'm out the traps, it's going quite well. So I'm managing to, but I think if I can get a draft finished next year, it will be great, and I'll hope to publish in 2027. That's my target.
Looking forward to it. Simon,
Okay,
I love
thank you very
talking to
much
you
indeed.
again.
Thank
Thanks
you
for your
very much. It's a
time.
real pleasure. Thank you very much
Good
indeed.
luck.
Thank you.